Okay, giving it just a second. Hey, what's up, guys? It's ex-mormon, my spiritual life, and Ubermormon is back to chat with us today. And also, I've got Jared here, my husband. Today, we are talking about the worst part about Mormonism, according to Jared. And the reason it's according to Jared is because Jared brought up with me the other day. He's like, I think I figured out what about Mormonism bothers me the most. And so I'm
and it's that I couldn't jack off all the time. I mean, I could and I did, but I felt real bad about it.
He wanted to jack off without feeling sad.
Yeah, so I left to do that sin, and now I no longer feel guilty. But I feel less happy in general. Like
yeah.
But that's because the Spirit left me. It's all about. So Thomas Sowell talks about trade-offs. There are no solutions, only trade-offs.
Yes.
I traded the Spirit for the ability to just chronically masturbate with no guilt. So.
For a massive right arm. You're.
Okay, so I guess I'll explain this a little bit.
Oh my God! Here we go.
So I've decided.
That was in the first 30 seconds. Jesus, guys.
I know, we got to hit them hard.
I already made a wanking joke, yeah.
You guys look good. She's talking about me, by the way.
Is that why she said guys?
Yeah. I'm just saying, she didn't specify, but I'm just assuming. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Jared. Hit us with what you got.
So I got to say, I think maybe the worst thing about Mormonism is, in short, the way it cripples people. And so I'm gonna start. I think it's important to start things off by defining your terms. Okay, so I'm going to be talking a lot about identity, right? And I think we need to come up with sort of a cohesive definition for what we mean by identity. And in short, I think what I mean by identity is, I've wrote this out, basically a collection of values, desires, preferences, ideas, etc., earned or inherited biologically, socially, or rationally, that define your specific person.
I just now heard that definition. I thought that was really good.
So that's what I'm talking about. And I told Morgan the other day that I think maybe this is the thing I dislike the most about Mormonism. I've gotten soft on it in previous years, but this is an area where I'm pretty hard. It's the opposite of soft.
I'm not talking. Heaven forgive us.
I'm gonna have to stop talking about boners.
If we hadn't touched on that so much, like really touched on it so much in the beginning.
Oh my God!
Your heart might have been fine.
I'm so sorry. Okay, all right, here we go.
So I explained to Morgan the other day that I think the thing I probably dislike the most about Mormonism is that it wants to be your entire identity, or at least most of it. And I think that's sort of the hallmark of a very high demand religion. Is I think the worse they get, the more of their identity, the more of your identity they want to encompass. So things like, we always compare it to Jehovah's Witnesses, right? And I think Jehovah's Witnesses is worse in this regard because your identity is wrapped up in being a witness, and you're proselytizing. You're not supposed to go to college. You're not really encouraged to get married or anything. Your identity is basically the church. Mormonism is less so, but it's still more so than other religions. And I think that's pretty obvious because I wondered for a long time, because when I first left the church, I was like, all right, this is awesome. I feel so much better off outside the church. That's great. Everyone's probably better off outside the church. And then I met ex-Mormons, and we're children. And it's because that's kind of what the church wants you to be, a very dependent child. They sort of treat you like a child. You got to look at the rules at BYU Idaho, right? All of the rules at BYU Idaho are to keep you from having sex with somebody, because they go away the second you get married. And they all treat you like you are very much incapable of doing that on your own. You are a child. And I think as soon as your belief in the Mormon church crumbles, everything crumbles. Because I always frame it this way. I've talked about this on Morgan's channel several times. I think it was not, other than having a spouse that was still in the church, it wasn't very difficult for me to leave the church. And I think that's because, like, I don't know, maybe I never believed in it that much to begin with, but like I definitely did. And I would build my identity based on these principles and values and stuff. And for the most part, they coincided very well with Mormonism. But when they wouldn't, you're supposed to default to Mormonism. But I would default to my own moral compass. And those are the shelf items. And so then when the belief system crumbled, I still had an identity. And that's why I think it was probably easier for me than it is for a lot of people. And I should say, it's because I was doing Mormonism wrong. Like, I wasn't doing it the way I was supposed to. The way that you're supposed to do it is to fit entirely in that tube that I'm putting over your identity. You cannot go out of there. Your whole identity is wrapped up in Mormonism. And that's how you do Mormonism right. So once Mormonism crumbles for you, you crumble. You're left with no identity. And creating an identity as like a 30, 40-year-old man or woman is not fun at all.
So if I were to summarize that, it would be like, one of your biggest issues with Mormonism is that it makes you like dependent on something for an identity.
It feels kind of like a crutch. And by the time you're in your 40s, your soul has atrophied so much that like maybe you just need the crutch forever.
Gotcha.
And that's a little bit bleak. But it also, there's a lot of people when they leave a religion, they have a faith crisis. Mormonism adds 2 layers to that, which are not guaranteed in leaving other faiths, right? So you have your faith crisis. A lot of people who leave other religions will also have sort of an existential crisis when they leave. They'll question if there's a God, does anything matter, whatever. Mormonism guarantees that existential crisis because it's really good at applying this deconstructionism to other Christian religions. It'll tell you why they're stupid and absurd. And so once you leave it, you already know why the other religions are insane or whatever. Not saying they are insane, just that's your point of view. And the other thing that it gives you, a third crisis, is the identity crisis. Yeah. It's like a premature midlife crisis.
They really stack those dominoes in a way.
They really do. How many Mormons have you heard? I mean, ex-Mormons have you heard, like, oh, I got married when I was like 22. I could have slept around and done all this stuff. That's not a thing that you're supposed to go through until you're like 50. Like, that's the midlife crisis. 40, 50, whatever.
Oh, I see what you're saying. That when I was talking about stuck in the dominoes, I meant like the testimony aspect of things. Like, well, if the Book of Mormon is not true and Joseph Smith wasn't a prophet, then the church isn't true and all the other churches are shit. So, our church is probably true. And then you knock over one of those dominoes and everything falls with it. Anyway, hit us with what you got, Ubermormon.
Oh my! You just left me like a whole spaghetti bowl of thoughts.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
Entertaining where people won't watch.
Just kidding. If I'm not good, everyone's gonna leave. So awesome. That idea. So I think it's interesting the like infantilization that happens to young people. The way that the church really wants you to like need them for everything. I remember when I was 18. So I hated my home ward growing up. So as soon as I turned 18, I went to the singles ward, and that's where I was for that year before I went on a mission. And I remember, so I was obviously the youngest person there, and everybody else was like upper 20s, which I thought was so old at the time. Because that's just Utah. And I mean, for you guys, you know what it's like. You're like, in Mormon culture, 26 is like, dude, are you still single? Like, how selfish are you? Yeah.
How selfish? What's wrong with you?
What's wrong with you? You have a personality disorder or something? But I remember going to Monday night FHEs, which is family home evening in the singles wards. And we would be there would be a bucket. We would be at the church outside the front doors with a bucket of sidewalk chalk, and we would be playing with sidewalk chalk. And I was the youngest one there. And I remember thinking, like, guys, aren't we a little older than 7? Like, why are we here right now? This is terrible. And then, like, it would get dark. And so then we would go in and we would watch a Disney movie in the gym. And, like, that was FHE. And I was like, okay, we're officially 7 years old. And this is why none of us are married, by the way, in case any of you were wondering. Like,
oh my God.
We're so small and young, and we need to depend on them for everything.
Well, it seems like in Mormonism, you're 7 years old until you're 50 years old.
When
it's
you're married, and all of a sudden you're boring, and you have to bring brownies to every event. And
oh man, my parents like still don't want to, like, even though all of us, like, basically all my siblings are married or old enough to, like, know what sex is. Nobody in my parents don't want to say the word sex. They still are, like, super weird about that. It's like, guys, we're all adults. It's not even an adult conversation. It's just a human conversation. Like, it's okay we're not 7 anymore. We can talk about these things like adults, but it's just like everything has to be hush hush and quiet, and it has to fit into this mold. And that's another thing that you said, Jared, that kind of stuck with me is like, so you said that the reason that you were able to, like, hold on to your telos was because you weren't doing it right, which is actually the best thing. Like, whenever I hear people say, like, oh, like, I was raised a really healthy way, my family wasn't super strict about the Sabbath day or, like, tithing or any of that stuff, I'm always like, I'm so happy for you that you lived it in a healthy way, but you lived it wrong. And you lived it wrong according to the internal logic. You did it wrong, even though it's healthier, right? So it's weird that the healthiest way you can live it is the wrongest way that you can live it. Like, the way I think about it is, like, if somebody was like, dude, I got really good at basketball over the weekend. We stopped the whole dribbling rule. Like, you don't have to dribble anymore. And the hoop is way lower. And the 3-point line is, like, super close. And I'm like, that's awesome that you're having fun, but you're not playing basketball anymore. Like, I don't know. You know what I mean? So, like, that's the best way I can try and describe it to people. And it's not that I'm unhappy for them. It's just like I was, like, killing myself trying to be good at regular basketball. Meanwhile, I didn't know you could bend the rules like this, and there were all these cheats. I don't know that. So that came to my head as you were explaining kind of what your process of leaving the church was like.
I just have to bounce off that really quick and just say that's hilarious and super relatable. And when you were Mormon, when I was Mormon and I would see people practicing Mormonism that way, I, like, looked down on them because I was like, you're not doing it right. And so it's funny and sad to think that the healthiest Mormons are the ones that are practicing it incorrectly. Oh man, yeah, that's wild.
So one of the things I was going to mention is that I think one of the ways they infantilize you is like the cardinal virtue of Mormonism, if I had to pick one, is obedience. It's like, I mean, you served a mission, so you know what it's like.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you had this, but like, you've probably heard the phrase exact obedience several times. You know, we even had a little list on the mission that was called exact obedience, and you had to check off everything you did. And it, like, some of it was study scriptures, tracked for this amount of time every day. But, like, it got down into the minutia of wake up at this time, brush your teeth, work out. Like, every second of your day was planned out.
Yeah.
And I think that Mormonism is so afraid of leaving anything up to your interpretation because it doesn't trust you, that it teaches you to not trust yourself. And I use the phrase cardinal virtue because I've been wanting to study the like philosophical cardinal virtues. What are they? Prudence, temperance, justice, and there's a fourth one. I don't remember what the fourth one is, but those are all things that are very much up to, in some degree of interpretation. Obviously, there's things that would pretty objectively not fit within temperance, or justice. But there's several different right paths to being just. Obedience is not up to any interpretation at all. It's because it's not a virtue. It takes, ironically enough, it takes free will out of the equation. Not that you don't have free will to be disobedient, but that you don't need free will. You just need to listen to the things they say and strictly obey.
Yeah, the rule kind of becomes, I've heard this so many times. Like, if I had a nickel for every time I heard this as a Mormon, I would be the wealthiest man in the world. But suddenly your free will becomes, it's your choice how you feel about being obedient, but it's not a choice to be obedient, right? So it's like you can feel restricted, or you can feel like, actually, this makes me more free. You know what I mean? But the obedience itself is never a thing that you get to like have a say in. Do you guys feel like that was your experience?
It was Satan's plan all along. Oh man. So that's a Mormon joke for those who don't get it, in reference to like Satan. You know, in Mormon theology, there's Satan's plan and there's Jesus's plan. Jesus' plan gives everyone free will, and then he's going to sacrifice himself to like make up for the sins. And Satan's plan is just to force everybody to be good. So like remove free will, and everyone gets to live in heaven forever because they just didn't choose any bad. Anyway, I think this is interesting because obedience is a safety net for people who don't feel secure in their decision making. And Mormonism sets you up to not feel secure in your decision making. And like, I have a friend who's having a faith crisis right now, and he is talking to me a lot about it a lot. And one thing he keeps bringing up is that like he's so afraid of like losing faith in the church because he doesn't trust himself to like navigate right and wrong on his own. And I was totally that way, you know. I was really afraid that I was a bad person, or that I was going to be a bad person, and Mormonism made me feel safe. It's just funny. Mormonism made me feel afraid of myself, and then was like saving me from myself after they made me feel afraid of myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because the natural
obedience is your cardinal virtue, sort of takes away personal responsibility in a way, because then the only thing you're really responsible for is just following the letter of the law. You're not really responsible. You don't have to, lucky you don't have to interpret anything. You don't have to like rationalize your actions, which puts you at risk for immoral actions. You just do what you're told, and that's it. That's kind of, I don't know, that seems to be what they want out of you.
Yeah, it begs the question for me, if your job is to follow the letter of the law, why ever talk about the spirit of the law? Because if there is an actual purpose to the law, and it's more important that you follow that, why the minutia? You know, why the strict, like, I know the law of Moses in the New Testament, it talks about how, like, you know, Jesus wasn't supposed to like eat certain pieces of corn or like walk through certain areas because it was the Sabbath day. But it's like, if the spirit of the law was always the higher law, and we now as active Mormons follow the higher law, what is the point of this exactness that we're talking about? Like, why is obedience such a big deal? And I think it's interesting, you know, that quote that Joseph Smith, that everybody restates, that basically says like, we teach them correct principles and they govern themselves. Are you guys going to bring this up later? Because I don't want to
go for it, man.
No.
Okay. I think it's interesting because I've been racking my brain over the last couple of days, like, what are the correct principles that the church teaches? And you've got like, the thing that's so mind-boggling about these is that none of these principles are like, from a philosophical perspective, first principles. So they're always based on assumptions that could be falsified or you have to rely on. So like, follow the prophet is a principle, right? But that lies on this assumption that there are prophets, first of all, and second of all, we have the right prophets. So that's two assumptions that are underneath this one. And then there's read and follow the scriptures, pay your tithing, be obedient. What's the other one that I wrote down? Oh, pray about big life decisions. Like all of these principles that we're asked to follow are resting on other assumptions that we haven't given ourselves permission to analyze. And so as soon as you start asking yourself, like, is it a wise thing, epistemologically speaking, to pray and then trust my feelings on big life decisions? It's like, probably not. Maybe we should like see if there's any data that we could access, or maybe we could ask people who've been in that situation before. Like when I left the church, I didn't realize that I was doing this, but I wrote down a list of my new first principles because I felt so duped. So when I left, and at the time I didn't know first principles was a thing, so I called them the meta rules. So I said, like, these are my rules going forward that will dictate whether or not I ever join another organization. And they were, I will say and think what I want, I will question or doubt what I want, and I will choose who my mentors are. Those three things, boom. Like if I'm ever part of some political organization or like a private organization or a sports team or a parents association, I don't know what kind of organizations are actually out there. If I'm ever a part of that and they're like, oh, we can't talk about that here, I'm done. Like if you're going to tell me what I can and can't say, I'm out. I'm sorry. That this is one of my rules. Criticize. Totally. Yeah. Anyway, rant over.
No, you're good.
Well, did you want to?
No, you can go.
I love that you brought that up. And one thing that I find super interesting about this is, okay, you've got Christians, right, who claim to be like the moral people, right? They set their morality on, God, basically, right? What God wants is the right thing. And what you notice about that is that Christians, I don't know, they don't really show up as morally rooted as you would think, because the minute like it's advantageous to the church that they lie or steal or kill, then like it's totally fine to do those things. And it's like, holy shit, like these people who are claiming to be really moral have really lucid morals that just bend to serving this organization. And one other thing I was going to say about that is when you're Christian, you have this, and I'm not like trying to diss on Christians necessarily, but when you're Christian, you have this fear of God that sets the precedence for your morality. And I think it's a really dangerous place to set your sense of morality around, because like, okay, you leave Mormonism and now like, why is stealing bad if God's not there? And the only reason I thought stealing was bad was because it would make God mad at me. And it's like, that's just not, it's not a good way to think of it. And it's probably not even a good way to think of it when you are Mormon, like, or you are a Christian. Like you should probably, have some morals that make sense on a foundational level to you. Like, oh, stealing is bad. Why is it bad? Because it's causing suffering, and causing suffering is wrong, like that kind of thing. But like for us who were born into a religion like this, like that kind of thinking just wasn't even an option. It was just like, oh, why is sex bad? Well, because it makes God upset for some reason. Unless you're married, then he's like, hey, I'm all about it. Unless you're gay, then he's like, gross. Anyway, that's my.
Well, you guys are both kind of hitting on something. If you want a good first principle, it's that you already kind of talked about that. This organization better allow me to ask why, and they better at least attempt to explain why.
Yeah.
Because there are some great morals within Mormonism that are based on solid principles, and then there are some ideas that are not really based on principles, and nobody's really willing to. I don't know. It's the whole obedience thing. You're not really allowed to explain why. And sometimes, and when they try to, they don't try very hard, because you don't have to try very hard. What do I need to apologize for? God? Fuck off. I'm like, it's God.
Yes.
But you're gonna question the Lord?
But
Excuse you.
I remember,
He's a big boy.
Yeah, I've been over
He can
this
take care of himself.
on Morgan's channel quite a few times. This story that happened in my mission when my mission president got up, told us all that story about Adam and Eve after they got cast out of the garden. They're sacrificing a lamb, and Peter, James, and John appear to them and say, "What are you doing?" "I'm sacrificing a lamb." "Why are you doing that?" And he said, "I know not, save the Lord commanded me to do it." And that was my mission president loved that passage, because he said, if Adam, the father of all of earth, didn't feel the need to ask why, how come you guys feel the need to ask why? And I wasn't a good missionary. I didn't, but that really,
no one ever thought you were.
No, I don't think they
Just
did.
kidding.
But I remember lying awake that night talking to my companion. I was like, he was all stoked, because as a missionary, you're supposed to get really stoked every time you have his own conference. And he wanted to talk about it. And I was like, I didn't like that at all. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, I mean, wasn't our entire religion like restored because Joseph Smith asked why? Like, what church is true? And like, he was curious and tried to look like that was the story we were fed. So, and he's like, oh, that's Joseph Smith, he's a prophet. And he got just massively uncomfortable and just wanted to shut down all, he wanted to shut down all conversation. And that's what I see that you just wrote this down, but I was going to bring that up.
Please.
That's sort of what it devolves into anytime you get people started on the word of wisdom. You want to ask why for coffee. Like, why no coffee? Well, like a tried and true Mormon isn't supposed to ask that, because you've been here long enough, you should know better. But the new ones, they'll allow to ask that, or the investigators, and they'll try they've tried over the decades so many different ways to explain it. It's caffeine, it's hot drinks might be bad for you. Well, then why hot chocolate? And eventually it always comes down to I know not, save the Lord commanded me. It's always it's a test of your obedience. And I was like, why does God want me? Like, as a parent, is that something I would teach my kid, is to just listen to me even when I'm saying things that don't make sense?
Well, and that's actually what our grandparents' generation was like, though. You know, that's how they treated our parents, like, for the most part. They would say things like, because I said so. You know what I mean?
So there's this guy.
So, like, it makes more sense that they thought God was that way, too.
So there's this guy at work that's told me this a few times. It's like an old kind of fable type thing. Not that old, but there's this little girl that's helping her mom in the kitchen, and she's making this big roast, and the mom cuts the end off either side of the roast, and she's like, well, why do you cut the end off? And she's like, I don't know, because my mom did it. And so the little girl's curious, goes and asks her grandma, and grandma's like, I don't know, my mom did it. And then she finally goes and asks her great grandma, and her great grandma's like, so it'll fit in the pan. And so sometimes there's a very logical explanation, but since we've gone through so many generations of nobody explaining what principle this is based on, people stop caring. And so that's something that, like, if you are LDS and you want this thing to thrive, you should really want to explain these things. You should want to get into the why of even coffee, man. Like, I don't know what you're going to say about it, but like, good luck. But you should want your philosophy to be cohesive.
Yeah, so I wrote down, as you were talking about all this stuff before you told the like ham baking story or whatever, I literally wrote down oven story, because I was thinking the same thing. But So that what you said at the very end there, you should want to know why. I remember at a stake conference when I was about to leave on my mission or had just come back from my mission, one of the stake counselors said, if your testimony comes from up here, you will leave the church. You don't need to know why. That's what he said. And I agree with you 100%, Jared, and that's just who I am. But that's the exact opposite of what the church wants you to think, because like, if you really know, if you really dig deep and you find out all the reasons why things are the way they are, you leave. It's like 2 + 2 is 4. You do all that stuff, you leave. That's the formula.
I don't know. Sometimes it equals 5. It depends on the circumstances of, you know,
it is true.
Of reality.
So I guess
I'm just kidding.
I will say, like, it doesn't make sense to me. There are people that know more about the history than I do that end up staying. And they make it work. They're very, I don't know. And I don't even necessarily want them to leave, because here's the thing. This is the other reason I bring this up, because I guess the best way to sum up this, my biggest beef with Mormonism, is that it gives you a prepackaged identity. It tells you this is your identity. And so once people leave the church and their identity crumbles, a lot of times they will seek out other ideologies that come with those same types of prepackaged identities. And they're never good. There's like, I don't know if a prepackaged identity can be a good thing.
I agree with you.
Well, it's certainly not authentic, right?
Right.
But it's, you know, it's hard. It's hard to separate yourself from an ideology. Like, where do I stop and these thoughts begin? And, you know, and when I think it's so hard not to think like, this all makes sense to me, so, you know, this is all correct or whatever. But statistically speaking, my brain is very analytical. Statistically speaking, any group you join, there's no way they're right about everything. There's just no way. It's just not possible. And I say that because it makes sense to me, like, statistically speaking, because unless you're God, you're not going to be right about all of your opinions. You're not going to be right about all of your thoughts. You're going to have your own confirmation bias.
What if you speak for God, though?
Ooh.
Gotcha.
Got me. Anyway.
Game over.
Oh my God, right. Rant over. One other thing I was going to say, though, just about the coffee thing really quick. When I was Mormon, thinking about the whole coffee situation, it never ever occurred to me that Joseph Smith could have been wrong about that. And here's the thing, you can be Mormon and think he was wrong about that specific revelation, but that's not how most Mormons view Mormonism. It is the truth with a capital T, which means no part of it can be criticized, no part of it can be wrong. And so it's interesting that like you were talking about, this whole prepackaged identity, it's not just that, but it's this whole like ideology worship, right? Of like, no part of my ideology can possibly be wrong, so I'm not going to question it. And not only am I not going to question it, but I don't even know how. I don't know how to think of how I would question it. It's like, you don't know things that you don't know. You don't even know that exists. And to just add to that, one more little thought is that I had a friend who left the church that was hanging out with a member the other day, and he said something along the lines of about people leaving and how they leave to sin. And if you're not aware, this is very commonly taught in most high demand religious groups, where if you leave, the reason you left is because something's wrong with you or because you wanted to sin. In Jehovah's Witness, they will actually say you're mentally diseased for leaving, because you're like, there's something wrong in your brain that can't understand that Jehovah's Witnesses is true. And my friend, the ex-Mormon one, said to the Mormon friend, hey, I I think you're wrong about that. I know a lot of ex-Mormons and none of them left for that reason. That I don't think people actually leave for that reason. And he's like, anyway, so the reason I wanted to point that out is because you see this, like, there's no, like, he's talking to an ex-Mormon who's telling him that's not why I left, and he doesn't even believe her, you know? And anyway, that's what I was going to say about that.
Well, they're not going to be honest about it because they're ideologically motivated to lie to you. Nobody's going to say I left to sin. I actually had a guy at work ask me about he's like, do you think Joseph Smith is a prophet? So I was like, no, man. And I remember, like, whenever that got brought up, like right when I left, I always was stoked for that because I got this grand, speech just ready to fire off at any moment about all my philosophical disagreements and all that stuff. But like he's like, why don't you believe? And I was like, I don't think it happened, man. I don't think the Book of Mormon happened. And that's kind of a big deal.
That one domino.
It's a little aside, I guess.
Yeah, and the total apathy in the answer just kills all of his gusto as well, and he's just like, awesome.
Well, plus, like, what do you say to that? Yes, it did.
Yeah. And then suddenly you're having a scientific debate. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting when you were talking about, like, you can't question coffee because it's capital T true. You see that thing happening now, except for instead of the truth, we have the science. It's like, it's a new ideology, right? And like this whole, like, it's a good thing that we don't ask why. That's a virtue, right? Apply it broadly. Do you think it's a good thing that the people you disagree with don't ask why? Then why is it a good thing when you don't ask why, right? Then it's just special pleading again.
Pleading.
Yeah.
Because
duh.
And it's so, like, when I try and like really drill down and say, like, this is an ideology and I want to avoid it. So like I would say, like, the best simile or like metaphor I can think of for what an ideology is it's like it's a railway or something like that. Like, it's a thing that will only take you to one place and you have to accept every single section of it in order for it to get you there.
Axiom, yeah.
Exactly. And so it's like, or like, I think in a past video I called it a ladder, where it's like, it will take you up, it will take you to this spot, and you know where it's going to take you, but you have to accept every rung in the ladder. And so if you don't accept the rung, your options are to get off the ladder or to just deal with it. Like, that really is your option, or go make your own ladder. But like, and the thing about this whole, like, railway argument or whatever it is that I'm saying right now, like, you can have tracks that will get you from point A to point B that are set upon something that is not solid enough to hold itself. And so, like, the best example I can think about that, I used to have a coworker who he was an interesting guy because he thought the Bible happened, the creation story is true, Noah was literal, all of this, but we've been abandoned by God. He thinks we're a failed experiment. So he called this the failed experiment theory. And he was like, oh yeah, a lot of people subscribe to this. And so he was always trying to convince me that Noah was a real guy and they found the ark in Turkey. And the reason, yeah, you all know somebody like this. But as I dug into it a little bit more, what I learned was the mountain, Mount Ararat or something like that, this mountain in Turkey is a sedimentary stone. Literally could not have been there during a global flood because it was built by something like that, right? So it's like, and that's the perfect analogy. That's the perfect metaphor for this whole ideology. Is it's like, it's built on something that isn't even strong enough to carry the weight of, like, all of the, oh man, now I'm forgetting the word. You know, the that one word from It's Always Sunny where he's like he's talking about how girls can't say no on the cruise ship because of the Why am I forgetting this right now? I think it starts.
It's not implication. It
is the implication. It is the implication.
Is it implication?
Yeah.
Okay.
Their ideologies, like the foundations of them, crumble under the weight of the implications of the theory. It's like it just doesn't work on so many levels. And anyway, I was gonna like stick the landing with because the implication, but I can't stick it anymore because I forgot. So sorry, everybody.
That's just not a road you want to go down. You've got to abandon ideology, bucko.
There's Jared's Jordan Peterson impression for you all. Give it a rate in the comments on 1 to 10. Yeah, I think I watched this one video on the channel Freedom of Thought Freedom, something like that. And it was basically talking about the minute that you do not acknowledge evidence that directly, contradicts a belief of yours, is the minute you stop learning. So the minute you stop listening to any, damaging, facts or evidence against your beliefs, the minute you stop learning, and you think about how destructive that type of mentality was as a as a religious person. Nay said 10 out of 10. Good job. It was like, oh yeah, Joe Smith did ABC, whatever, and like us being like, no, like the minute you have that kind of attitude is the minute you stop learning. And I think it's hard for us after leaving a high demand religion to not be cautious of what other ideologies we're getting ourselves really attached to. And I don't know, I see this a lot, but I saw it for myself. Like it was hard for me I wanted to fill that void, and I wanted to feel like I knew what the answers were. And it's really easy to fall into either another cult or another high demand group, or to even make politics your new religion. There's like a lot of different ways that dogma sticks with you, and the language just changes, and you have to watch out for that. And I think it's unfortunate that Mormonism sets you up to almost need someone to tell you what to do all the time. And then it's scary because when you need someone to tell you what to do all the time, you better watch out who you're listening to, because you will, for me, it was a big problem of like, I just kept trying to find another hero to tell me what to do. Anyway.
It's not just that you should watch out for that. It's you just don't do it. It's interesting you bring up the science, because like that's a good illustration of a lot of people think that dogma can only be like spiritual, like sort of metaphysical. When people think of religion, they think of God and the prophet and all that stuff. But I think what I've learned is that humans, for the most part, are fundamentally religious creatures.
Yeah.
And they will be religious even after they leave church. Leaving church doesn't mean leaving religion. Because if you, I don't know if you can entirely leave religion, but if you can, it's a scary place to be, because everything is sort of, I brought up earlier the difference between the cardinal virtues and obedience. And one of the best ways to explain that is that something like temperance or prudence are abstract concepts. And looking back, I'm trying to think of abstract concepts that I learned growing up as a Mormon. I don't think the church likes them very much. Obedience is not abstract at all. It is very straightforward. You don't have to decipher anything. You just obey. Anyone can do that. You could teach a dog to be obedient. They go to obedience school. You can't teach a dog to be temperate.
Totally. You remind me of Paul Tillich's definition of religion. which is whatever in your life is of utmost concern. The ultimate concern is your religion. So the way that I think about this, and Tillich also said that God is the ground of being, which is like if you use those two quotes together, you could picture that your life is headed towards a destination. Imagine that you're in your car, you're in Google Maps, you say, I want to go to this place, and now you're going towards your destination. Well, the map itself now has meaning because you have an aim. And so people who are truly religionless, like they don't have an aim at all, I think you only go nihilistic. That's the only option, because nothing means anything. Like there's a Starbucks here, there's a Starbucks over there. One from the point, like it doesn't matter, right? It's just a Starbucks, but you have a place that you want to go. Then this Starbucks means something because, hey, maybe you want to stop there and it's closer to your destination. It's closer to your route. So now even roads that don't normally mean anything to any other people, they mean something to you because it's either your route or it's not your route. So religion is the place that you're aiming at. It's your utmost concern, according to Paul Tillich. And I think what scares a lot of people, and this is barely shifting the topic, but not really. When you are married and one person has a faith crisis and the other person doesn't, this person is scared because they don't know if this person's aiming at the same destination anymore. And so that provokes so much anxiety. That's like, hey, before 5 years ago, when we got married, we both wanted to end up here. And now I don't know if that's the case anymore. I don't know who you are anymore. I don't know if we have the same goals anymore. And it's terrifying.
Right.
And so this idea of like humans are ultimately religious, like, yes, because we all, no matter what it is, we all have an aim. And if you don't have an aim, you're hopeless. Get an aim, right? Like think of an aim. Because if you don't have one, you really are fucked. Like beyond all fuckery, you're fucked. And so but it's like Mormonism sets you up. So it's like, this is the aim. You can't have another aim. And it's ironic and it's hilarious. And I laugh at this with my friends all the time, where it's like Joseph Smith gave people a name, right? He was like, you're going to be good family men. And they were like, hell yeah. And he's like, you're going to read the scriptures. And they're like, hell yeah. And then Joseph Smith is like, and I'm going to have sex with your wives. And they're like, what? Like, it's what, like in politics, it's the oldest trick in the book, but like one party will say, we need to support the troops. So I've written this bill and the bill is called the Support the Troops Bill. And then 50% of the money in the bill goes to like Pakistan for something like something totally different, right? And then the other party is like, because that's called stuffing the pork in like political terms. So they're like, you're filling it with pork. We don't accept the pork. And then the original party is like, what? You have something against the troops? Like, that's how I see Joseph Smith. He's like, what? You don't think that I just told good stuff about families? They're like, no, we just disagree about how you're going to marry our wives. And he's like, it's all part of the plan, babe.
Why does this love chastity thing say that also you get to bang my daughter?
Oh my gosh. See, this is really interesting.
I will write the happiness letter.
Oh my god.
I will prove to you why.
I think this is so interesting because when you think about why people get stuck in like certain ideologies or religious groups or whatever, it's because they're not usually offering only bad ideas. They're usually offering good ideas. Like you said with this Joseph Smith example, like we're going to be good family men and we're going to serve the Lord. You know, it's like, those are good things. Like I want to get behind those good things. And just realizing that, okay, just because some ideologies have some good things to get behind doesn't mean all of the ideas are good or that all of them are equally good, which, you know, is worth noting.
I will say that Mormonism also, like in your analogy of the spouse that leaves and doesn't leave, they kind of up the ante in that if spouse A comes to spouse B and says, hey, I don't believe in this anymore, and they say, what? I was going to get my own planet, you motherfucker. Like, that is kind of a ripoff. That was the first thing Morgan said to me.
Yeah, the motherfucker thing especially.
She's like, I was gonna make Dragon Ball Z World, you asshole.
No, Pokemon World. God, Jared. Oh,
every Mormon husband and wife conversation starts with, "Hey, sweetie," and then the other one is like, "What is wanted?" And then it's like, "I don't believe that anymore." And they're like, "You motherfucker! I was gonna get my own cola part 3."
Oh my god.
Saying what is wanted is severely underrated, by the way.
What another aspect of this, oh my god. Another aspect of this I wanted to bring up is the us versus them mentality, right? Because you see that in high demand groups. And I think I'm just spitballing this with you guys. I think that I was a lot nicer to ex-Mormons as a Mormon than I was to Mormons as an ex-Mormon. And I think it was a temporary stage, but I think that there was this like there's definitely an us versus them mentality within Mormonism. But I think it's trumped slightly by like how nice you're expected to be. So like you're like really nice to everybody, you know, like even if like they don't believe or whatever. But as an ex-Mormon, I kind of felt like this like a new type of self-righteousness. And I think it's something that as humans we're very, very inclined to be in that attitude of us versus them. And it's a very toxic mentality. But I was reading this book recently, The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt. And in it, he talked about this experiment that they did. And I'm sorry, because I'm probably going to butcher it a little bit because it's been a while since I heard him explain it. But basically, they were showing people videos of someone like getting pricked with a needle, I think. And whenever it was like, it would show like a classification of the person, like if they were Christian or if they were atheist or if they were whatever. And they're monitoring the person's brain who's watching these videos of these random people getting pricked with like a needle. And their brain is like they would get more triggered when someone was getting pricked with a needle that they considered to be part of their tribe, which is just so crazy to me, to realize that like we not only are we so quick to fall into that us versus them mentality, but like it's almost like we're less sympathetic toward people who we don't view as part of our tribe. And I think that it's kind of a scary tendency, and it's one to be aware of for sure, because that it's so ingrained in us, not just as humans, but like even more so when you're raised in like a high demand group like that.
Yeah, that reminds me of, I know that I heard this on one of the biblical lectures from Jordan Peterson, but I couldn't tell you which one. But if you're watching a sports game and your team wins, your testosterone goes up. If you're watching and your team loses, your testosterone goes down. Like we are team creatures, from the very beginning. I guess tribal creatures is the better way to say it, but that study is interesting too, because it's like we feel hurt when our tribe gets hurt. That's how tribal we are.
Yeah,
that is wild to me.
Right. I think it's something to that we want to be aware of, because I think as a human being, like I don't want to feel less sympathetic towards someone who's Mormon. Like if they have a bad day, I don't want to sit there and be like, well, they're Mormon, so they can just fuck off. But that's kind of the natural reaction. And I want to overcome that. I want to overcome the natural man. And I think the best way to do that is to be as compassionate as you can and understand where people are coming from. And the more compassionate you are, probably the less us versus them you're going to be. And then you might be more open to, learning things. And then you'll probably grow more if you're not so like, I have to defend my side and protect my side and hate the other side. And,
Yeah, I think part of that is the tribalism, and I think the other part is there is a definite feeling of superiority. It's sort of the it's sort of the atheist stereotype, is the guy that thinks he's, smarter and better than everyone. The guy that thinks he's real clever because he went to Barnes and Noble and moved all the Bibles to the fiction section. So you definitely feel better than you did before. You're like, I can't, like, I feel, because it feels triumphant when you are raised in something and steeped in it, and then all of a sudden you have to get to a point where you either ignore your heroes or kill them, and then you kill them and you stand above what you were, and you're like, I am triumphant, and which is it's a good thing. It's not bad to feel triumphant, but then to look over at other people and be like, you are not triumphant like me. I think that's an instinct that we have.
Yeah.
And I think ex-Mormons get it a lot. I think they also, there's a little bit of, this is maybe a little bit different, but there's a little bit of projecting that goes on. I noticed that some of the people who are harshest on Mormons, I think, were like the shittiest Mormons. I hear these people talk about how like racist and homophobic Mormons are, and they use these examples of like, oh yeah, Mormons don't want gay people to have rights, and they don't want, I don't know, that they'll say just terribly uncharitable things about Mormons. And I'm like, I wasn't like that when I was a Mormon. And most of them I know are really like, yeah, if they might think your lifestyle is a sin, which sucks, but tell them to fuck off and go live your life the way you live it. But most of them aren't actively trying to stop you from having rights. And I feel like the ones that are claiming, I don't know, maybe there's some projection. Oh, good.
Our son is missing his special teddy bear, and my friend just found it. So I'm going to deal with this emergency really quick.
Oh, sweet.
Emergency.
You guys keep going. I'll be right back. I'm going to tell Parker.
Alone.
Yeah. Jared, I feel like I'm torn about this, and I know what you mean, because when you leave the thing that you've been steeped in your whole life, that is a hard thing to do. And so it's like, and here's the other thing, right? Ex-Mormons know the Mormon arguments, and they've been there, where Mormons typically don't know the ex-Mormon arguments, and they haven't been there. So I'm not saying that ex-Mormons are better, because I agree with you, they shouldn't feel superior. There is a period of time where as a person who's recently left the church, you think, okay, well, I kind of know where you're coming from, and you don't know at all where I'm coming from because you haven't been there. And a lot of Mormons have this idea of like, well, you just wanted to sin, like we talked about earlier. So it's like, not that we are superior, because I don't think that. I'll say that 1,000 times. We're not superior. I think it wasn't working for us enough that we decided that we didn't have a choice anymore but to question it. I really think that's what it comes down to. And then the religion itself, as soon as you question it, it's like a house of cards, right? But I give Mormons this grace of like, not that it's mine to give, but I give them this grace of like, it's working for you, so you have no need to question it. Like the squeaky wheel gets the oil, really, is what it comes down to, in my opinion. And for ex-Mormons, it didn't work for us. And you can ask 1,000 of us why we left, and usually, yeah, we all will mention like, oh, I read the CES letter. Oh, I did this. Oh, I did this. But if you go like 5 years prior, it's like, well, these 4 things just weren't working for me anymore, and I wasn't happy anymore. I remember once on my mission, so I was living in the mission house. My companion and I, like, we were the APs.
I knew it.
Yeah.
Nerd.
That's why I'm called Ubermormon. I was Ubermormon, you guys.
I was too.
Yeah, no, I was Ubermormon. And then I'm Uber as in beyond. But
now you're the Ubermormon.
Yes, yeah.
From Ubermormon to Uber. How do you? Anyway,
I don't know how you say Mormon.
I don't want to emphasize it to make it clear that I'm mentioning Ubermensch, but whatever. Anyway, go ahead.
I remember we were getting ready for bed. We were talking. We were on this long. I was in Peru, and Peru is one of those like thousands of people are baptized, and then 900 of them leave. Like,
yeah,
that's just what it's like down there. And so we were constantly trying to reactivate people. That was our thing. Reactivate. And so we did a lot of work with wards and with home teachers and with bishops. And we tried to train ward members on like, this is how you retain somebody. You know, we were doing the thing from Preach My Gospel, give them a calling, give them a responsibility, make them feel like we need them here. And we would just go on these long rants to each other about how the church just is. It's so simple, right? You just read the scriptures, you just pray every day, you just go on your visits, you just do all this stuff. And we would talk about how simple it was. And then I remember one night distinctly, we're getting ready for bed. My companion's in bed. I'm about to climb the bunk and go to sleep. And it's like I did this sigh, like my soul did a big sigh. It was just like, I don't think it's that simple, and I don't think I can do this forever. It was just like, it just left me. And I think I had 4 transfers left after that. But I like, to this day, I remember this. I was just like, they're asking a lot of us. And I don't know how long I can do this, you know?
Yeah.
And that's, you know, a missionary who's living the highest law possible. That's an AP who's living like higher law, like trying so hard to be obedient. And I just felt like, no, this isn't going to last forever for me. I can't possibly do it.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, I come home and within 2 years, I'm not going to church anymore. And now it's been, I don't know, 5 years or something like that. But it's just like, no. But I guess the point of that whole story is like, ex-Mormons just had a moment where we realized it wasn't working for us anymore. We're not better than Mormons. We had a moment where we realized this doesn't work. And so I have to question it because it no longer is in alignment with whatever is actually inside me. Whether it's a soul or an anima or a heart or whatever it is, it's no longer in alignment.
I'm gonna check this comment out really quick. Do they give patriarchal blessings to Mormon men that don't go on a mission, that are not going to get married, try to keep them in the church? Oh, so like giving them a patriarchal blessing to try to stop them from leaving? Is that?
I think it's saying, go ahead, Jerry. Go ahead.
I think what he's asking is like, is that one of the tactics? Like how giving them a calling is a tactic to keep them engaged. And I probably, yeah. So I had one friend I remember who like was never really serious about the church. And I remember it being very striking because I was serious about church. Like I would go, you know, I was at church every Sunday growing up. I was bearing my testimony every month. And I wanted to get my patriarchal blessing as soon as I could. And like, it took time. They wanted me to go through these steps to get it. It was more difficult for me to get it. And then my friend, who was never serious about the church, only went when his mom made him go. Like they pushed him to get his patriarchal, not just his parents, but like the patriarch was like, "Hey, well, let's get you your patriarchal blessing." And it kind of got him for a little bit, for a minute after he got his patriarchal blessing. It's funny because I was there at his patriarchal blessing. And so I was mentioned in the blessing, and the patriarch said, "Your brother here." And they're like, "Oh, he knows that." Like later, they're like, "He knows that you're like a brother to me." He's like, "No, I think he literally thought I was your brother." But that's kind of a side point. But yeah, so to answer the question in long form, I think that yeah, there probably several instances, but a patriarchal blessing is only a one-time thing. So
well, and like they're coming from this space of like, the ends justify the means, right? Like we need to give them a calling because then they'll stay in the church, and they need to stay in the church so they get their salvation. Like, and like coming from this place of compassion, like, yes, what a lot of their tactics are manipulative, but like they really sincerely think they're doing what's best for you. And I think that sometimes we lose sight of that. We're just like, oh, they're so manipulative and so, you know, sleazy and stuff. And it's like, yeah, but like they are so like afraid of God, and they're so afraid of God for you. And I wanted to throw back to this comment from a while ago from Nay. Religion is culty because people are culty. is the most profound comment of the night.
So I guess this kind of brings me to a question that we had Jonathan Streeter on last time, and I was kind of asking him this a little bit. Because some of those tactics are considered manipulative. But I guess my question is this, like, if what they promise you, if they say like, oh yeah, join the church, you'll have this community, blah, 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 manipulates you into joining, and then just like for the rest of your life, you do have that community and friendship and the thing they said you would have, is it really manipulation? Is that really a bad thing?
Yeah, that so
because it's not like
because
some people there's a little bit less attention that you're given after you join the church for a while, but I don't like, I had community when I didn't care too much about it when I was a kid.
And you had salvation, so they didn't lie.
And a planet. No, it's
you had your planet until they redacted that.
Is it like manipulative to offer friendship and community when they're sincerely gonna give you the friendship and community?
Right. So I was in like this really, really tiny area of Peru. This is like a medium short answer to answer your question, because I've thought a lot about this. I was in an area of Peru called Pampas. It's a beautiful little farming town. There were 4 of us. It was a massive farm town, but like very secluded behind a valley. Half of the people we couldn't even proselyte to because they only spoke Quechua, which is like what they spoke in Peru before Spanish. Okay.
Oh, shit.
So yeah. So like crazy secluded town. Nobody could read. Those who could speak Spanish, it was bad Spanish, like grammatically bad. And then the rest of them couldn't. But we found this lady there. I only baptized one person in Peru, which is actually weird because most people baptize a ton of people in South America. But I only baptized one person, and it was this person. I knocked on her door and we started talking, and she immediately started asking us questions about like, what happens to our kids if they die? Like if our kids die before we die, do we get to see them again? Do we get to be with them again? And so immediately, like we walked into her house and did lesson 2 immediately. And we talked about the premortal life, and we talked about how you get to raise your kids in the spirit world afterwards and all that. And she was like crying, and it was amazing. And we were like, wow, what a person who's ready to hear this story. So this so far sounds like I'm bearing my testimony, but I'm not. So
I'm getting teared up already.
I know, right? But we finish all the lessons, and she's like, yes, I want to be baptized. And we start going through the interview questions, and 10 years prior, she had had an abortion. And she felt terrible about this abortion. And we took her to the president, and, you know, she had her special interview, and she left the interview crying. And he was like, you guys really found somebody who needs the gospel right now. And we were stoked. And that was the only person I baptized. And she left after like she got baptized. Within about 2 weeks, she moved back to her hometown. It was outside the mission boundaries. I didn't have a way to contact her. And I think about her a lot. And the thing that I think about so much is, here's a woman who her biggest like existential fear, like the thing that caused the most anxiety in her whole life, was solved by something that might not be true. So is that a net positive for her life, or is it a net negative, is what I ask myself. Like she feels safe again. You know, she feels like she gets to see her kid again. And whether or not that's based on the fact that Joseph Smith lied and was sleeping with other men's wives, like the comfort that she feels is real. And I would never in a million years want to take that away from her, even though now I feel like it's a moral quandary, right?
Yes.
So I don't know. I'm throwing that back at you guys.
I guess I don't.
So fascinating. I want to say, comment below your thoughts on this, because this is a really interesting topic, right? Like, and I want you to say your thought, but I also wanted to. This person clarified. My cousin received his patriarchal blessing that said he's not going to get married, And I think it's because he didn't go on a mission. So I think the blessing was telling him he's not going to get married. And I've never heard of something like that happening. So that's wild.
I've heard of that before.
What? Really? That's so sad.
Well, okay, so
I mean, assuming that person wanted to get married.
I've only ever heard it in regards to like people with special needs or something like that. Like, because the bishop or the patriarch thought maybe they wouldn't get married and was trying to comfort them. Like it's so I don't know.
Anyway, go ahead and answer what you're.
So I suppose if you get down to the pure, honest Mormon answer, and if you push any of them on this, they would admit to it's not so much that they're lying to you that yes, you will see your kids again. It's more like, okay, well, do you know I'll see my kids again? They'll say, well, I mean, I don't know, but I think you will. Like, I believe you will. And so I don't think it's as straightforward as like it's based on something that might not be true, because it's presented as something like it's presented as something that I think is true but might not be true. And when I say it's presented, it's not obviously they use the language of I know the church is true.
Well, but like putting that aside, like, was it a net good or a net bad in her life? You know what I mean? Because she's comforted, like she's gonna see her dead kid again, and is that worth it? Like, assuming it's totally built on a lie, like, like assuming that, like, I mean, you could even just assume like nothing happens after, right? And it's like, wow, that's a crazy question. And I wonder if like it depends on the person that you're talking about, because I think some people don't function well without like a spiritual hope to kind of keep them going. But I also think that there's a lot to be said about the value of truth. And if we lose sight of like an objective truth existing, I think like things get kind of scary.
Well, I do think that essentially what you're asking is, I feel like I gave her the blue pill. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Right. It's such a good question.
But what I'm saying is that things aren't quite as cut and dry as they are in the Matrix. Red pill, blue pill.
We don't know.
I don't know
if
you'll see your kid again.
So maybe he didn't blue pill her.
This is what I think is true. I see.
Right. No, it's when it's so ethically dicey. Ethically isn't the right word, but it's so like it's so close to going either way. Sometimes when I'm dealing with something that's that gray, I try and make it as black and white as possible, just to see like what way does it fall, And so asking a question like, is it a net negative or a net positive in her life? I'm making it as black and white as I can. And the way I feel, like, I don't feel bad about having baptized her. I think that I made her life better. But there's this thing, there was a while where I regretted my mission and I regretted the people I had taught, even though I didn't baptize that many. But there's this thing that happens with ex-Mormons, and this is probably my beef with ex-Mormons. Two thoughts. You should have in your life a hierarchy of values, and truth should be somewhere high, in my opinion. But I think that sometimes ex-Mormons make truth the scale itself and lose the entire wealth and depth of the mythological world and the meaning of the world, because meaning is not true or not true. Do you guys like see what I'm saying? They turn truth into the scale, and then they're like, I will only think true things. It's like, well, where does your meaning come from? Because meaning is deeper than what's factually true. And that, I guess, brings me to this other idea that at least for me was true. I think it's true for a lot of people, but Okay, I'm just gonna say it and then we can talk through it because it's weird to like prepare people for this. There's a mythological symbol of it's an old mythological symbol. If anybody's interested in like mythology, read The Origin and History of Consciousness by Erich Neumann. He's a student of Carl Jung. Read that book. It's a cool book. The first chapter is called the Ouroboros, and it's a snake that eats itself. And it's a snake. It's a snake, and a lot of people think that it's the snake from the Garden of Eden. It eats itself because it regenerates chaos. It's in a circle because it goes on forever. And this is the stage that that consciousness is formed from. This is the first stage. And Nietzsche referred to the Catholic Church and its downfall as they loved truth so much that they proved themselves false and they ate themselves. So Nietzsche called the Catholic Church the Ouroboros because it instilled a love of truth in its members until they realized the thing that taught them to love truth wasn't true, and then you're in a cycle. And that's what happens with Mormonism. And in my opinion, that's exactly what's happening with the woke movement. Is they're basing all of their premises on moving targets that will only eat themselves eventually because it's premised on progressivism. But all of that aside, like you can't. That's not even a version of the world that you get to look at if your scale is truth. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm like speaking, I don't know. I'm at that point where like my brain isn't working anymore, but like you don't get that half of the world when you only think in binary terms. Like when I learned Spanish and I heard a love song in Spanish, like I had heard this love song before I knew Spanish. And then I heard it after it and I was like, God damn, that is a deep song. But it just sounded like noise to me before. And so it's like how many things in life are really that imbued with meaning, are really telling that much of a story that we simply miss out of shallowness. And so I repeat, that's my beef with ex-Mormons, is when you make truth your scale, you miss very complicated, very beautiful things that will go right over your head because all that you care about are zeros and ones.
Sure. So like I guess I'd say that. So I find a lot of beauty in the story. Like I can talk to Mormons about my favorite hymns and my favorite scriptures and things like that. I love. If I could get one like poster, it would be the part in the Book of Mormon where Coriantumr, like millions of soldiers are lying dead on the battlefield, and it's just Coriantumr and Shiz left, and Coriantumr knocks him down, and he's passed out from blood loss, but not dead yet. And he cuts off his head, but before he cuts off his head, he leans and rests on his sword and looks at the battlefield. And if I could get one poster, it would be that. That'd be one of the coolest illustrations to have right there. And I guess that's kind of what I would go with. I don't know. Does that make sense to go with what you're saying? The difference between meaning and truth. Like, that didn't actually happen, or at least I'm pretty sure it didn't actually happen. But you can find meaning in it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Totally. It's like feelings aren't true, but they happen inside of you and you feel them. It's like, sure, you could measure your brain and you can measure the neurotransmitters and you could say like he feels love right now, but love is way bigger than that. And I think that that's what religion has always been. I think that religion itself is like one big argument from ignorance, where it's like, I don't know what makes me feel this way, but something makes me feel like I'm part of a bigger thing and I can't prove it wrong. And so I choose to express it down this set of train tracks, It's because Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot. He's like, when you are writing a book, he always gives this example. I'm sure both of you have heard it. But he's like, when you're writing a book, what are you doing? Well, you're looking at a computer and you're moving your fingers. But what are you doing? Well, you're like putting words together. You're putting sentences together. You're doing all of this. And why are you writing the book? To be a good husband and provide for my family, to be a good member of society and contribute to the world, to do this, all these things that go up. And it's like at some point, you can't explain why it's good anymore. And so you just have to say, argument from ignorance. It means something more that I can't explain. And I'm gonna do it this way, you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's got to be some underlying assumption in everything. That's you ever listen to Sturgill Simpson?
Actually, no.
He's like an underground country music singer, and like in the Nashville thing. He's amazing. And he's got this song called "Turtles All the Way Down," and so the the myth is that in some culture they used to say that the Earth is on the back of a giant turtle, and somebody would ask, well,
yes,
what's the turtle on? It's like, well, it's on a bigger turtle. And they're like, well, okay, but like, where does that end? And they say, well, it's turtles all the way down. And it's funny because if I remember correctly, it's been a long time since I've heard the song, but it's about pot and like and about like why it's illegal. And it like one of the quotes is, how can they make illegal a chemical that you make in your brain or something like that? And he's kind of, I think, again, I haven't heard it in a long time, but if I remember it right, I think what he's trying to explain is that if you ask somebody like their premise on which like they think that pot should be illegal, it's kind of just turtles all the way down.
Yeah.
And it's based on these weird sort of assumptions. You gotta be careful about axioms, I guess, is what it comes down to.
Well, I think that if you go over Fowler's stages of faith again, like stage 5 or stage 6, the final two basically say you're no longer concerned with the mysteries of life. You live without any real anxiety, and you're just okay with the fact that there are things that you don't understand. And that's the sooner the ex-Mormons could get there. Not that I want to like should on them, because that's what prophets are for, and I'm not a prophet, but if you could just be okay with the fact that sometimes life is full of incongruencies and there are things that we're not going to understand, and just like be okay with that, you'll actually find meaning in it. It's turtles all the way down.
It's this idea of a break, like instead of that void, you know, because it's a void that is left behind when you leave a religion, that void of having all those answers. And what's left behind is a lot of fear of uncertainty, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like when I was freshly ex-Mormon, it was like, I don't like this uncertainty. It feels so unsafe to me. So I go around, I'm trying to find my new prophet, right? And I keep trying to find people that can tell me what to do. And I keep learning over and over again that nobody really knows. You know, they're all just guessing based off of, you know, what they've experienced. And that was really hard for me. But like going along with what you were saying, it's this like, if you can embrace uncertainty instead of being afraid of it, then life starts to change, right? Instead of being like, I need to find a hero to tell me what to do, because that's the biggest problem, right, for a lot of ex-religious people, is that they need a prophet. They have a prophet-shaped hole in their system, and they need a prophet. And if they can instead say, I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm okay with that. That's when you become your own prophet, right? And not to say that like all of a sudden you're smarter than everybody else, but you're at least able to rationalize through things instead of just taking everything that's said to you as fact from whatever your prophet source is.
Which I think that's supposed to be the spirit of faith, right? Is the belief, not the knowledge. And I remember that was like the final stage of my testimony. I would still get up and try to bear testimony. And rather than saying, I know the church is true, I would say, I believe the church is true. And I even did that a little bit on my mission. I know it freaked out some of my companions. No, you're supposed to say you know it, but I don't know it, and you don't know it. We believe it. That's the whole point of faith. Like,
if we knew it, we wouldn't fucking be here. Well, and I was just gonna finish that thought by saying, how do you embrace uncertainty? And I think the best way to do it is to realize that uncertainty is just reality. Reality is uncertain. We don't know what's coming next. Nobody really knows. Everyone thinks they know. Not everyone. Some people think they know, but we don't know for sure. And if you can settle into that, like, well, no one really knows, you can kind of let go of like being so afraid of like not knowing what the answer is, because there's not a way to know necessarily. No.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Jung said you have to kill your parents to be an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how many 45-year-old men are afraid of their parents? Like, there's a lot. There's actually a lot. And yeah.
I've noticed at work, if I want somebody to really get something, I tell them to train somebody else. Because as soon as you have to train somebody, as soon as you have to be the last line of answers, you start bullshitting and you start realizing that, hey, everybody else is bullshitting and it works just fine. Like, suddenly, like, that's the Matrix. That's the Iron Curtain. Like, that's looking behind the curtain. That's like growing up, like, hey, we're all just fucking guessing. So
that's when black and white goes to gray.
Yeah.
We're all just guessing. We're all just guessing our best guess.
Yeah.
And some best guesses turn out great and some turn out bad. And that's just life. Yeah.
Totally. And you base the best you can. You base things off of your experience. And then you know what? You just fucking run with it.
Right. Right. Bud said, I know the sun is going to run out of hydrogen and its core is going to become a red giant, destroy the earth eventually.
You don't know that. Jesus is going to come way before that.
What do you believe
just
in?
Bear his Dawkins testimony.
Yeah, I think he just.
I know, in the name of Richard Dawkins and his son Sam Harris.
Oh my god! It's a scientific certainty that this thing is going to go out at some point.
Oh my god, Jared.
Oh man, I love this. In the meantime, you got to get the laundry done. Yep.
That's true.
That's
they just said everything we said better than us.
I know. Oh, that's one of maybe my favorite moment in the Fargo series. Have you ever watched that?
I haven't, no, and I've heard you talk about it before.
Really like it.
It's absolutely my favorite.
Would like it. You gotta watch it.
There's this wonderful storyline in season 2 where everybody wants to talk about the myth of Sisyphus and absurdism. And for anybody watching that doesn't know, the myth of Sisyphus is that he pushes a boulder up a mountain every day. And that's his purpose, is to push the boulder up the mountain. And then when he goes to sleep at night, the boulder rolls back down to where it started. And every character interprets that story differently in Fargo. Like, one character somehow finds great purpose in that. Like, he's just pushing the boulder for his family. And it's I'm going to keep pushing that boulder for my family. And anyway, there's this teenage girl that's reading it. And near the end, she reads the passage to this woman, and this woman who is dying of cancer while her husband is out getting shot at by bad guys, and she's having to raise a 6-year-old girl. And so the teenage girl is like, Camus, the author, Camus says that life is absurd and nothing matters. And this cancer-ridden woman just goes, oh, well, I reckon Camus here didn't have a 6-year-old daughter that needed his attention. And she's just like, fuck off, little girl. Life isn't absurd. I got a daughter I got to deal with.
Right.
That's one of my favorite answers to that.
Yeah. It's the problem of framing. Like, meaning and nihilism is the problem of framing. It's like, if you want to say life is meaningless when you look at it from a 1,000-year lens, then you're probably right. But like, that was totally arbitrary that you chose a 1,000-year lens. Like, give it a 5-minute lens and ask how meaningful it is, It just,
the other problem is that doesn't make life easier to live, thinking nothing matters. It makes it harder to live. But I don't know. I've got a nihilistic side of me. I have to wrestle with that side. We should do a totally different video on that because it is a huge tangent. But man, yeah, I like how you said it, that's an arbitrary amount of time, 1,000 years, and 5 minutes is also arbitrary. Yeah. And like,
just
does
pick
that
a
thing
better
matter
time.
in 5 minutes? Yeah.
Pick a better time.
Pick a different time. That's interesting. Yeah.
Well, we drifted off topic, but that's okay. It was fun.
It was a good
We
time.
really did.
Essentially, my biggest beef with Mormonism is that it cripples people and then leaves them with nothing resembling an identity because it gives them a prepackaged identity, and then it gets them off looking for other ideologies that give them other prepackaged identities, or it leaves them as a 40-year-old man to build an identity from scratch.
So what's the solution?
Oh no.
Don't leave Mormonism.
Stay Mormon, folks.
Just, I guess, stay Mormon. I've seen what happens to a lot of you people when you leave. Just
oh no, Jared, you gotta give a solution.
I think we gave a solution. Like,
no, the solution. Cody touched on it. Is learn about first principles.
Yeah.
And name to yourself what your first principles are.
I like
that. And if you are Mormon, name some first principles on which you can base your Mormon beliefs.
Yeah.
Like that's a thing that, like, we complain about public schools all the time. You shouldn't be able to come out of, I don't know, the 8th grade without knowing what first principles are. If we're going to teach anything.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. Should we do the dentist thing?
Yeah, I figure we can do the dentist thing too.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Let's do the dentist thing.
So Ubermormon reminded Jared of this episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And I haven't seen this episode, so I need one of y'all to recap.
Well, so something that everybody should know about this show. They're all pretty shitty people for the most part. Charlie's not shitty. He's just disgusting and unfortunate for the most part. But Dennis is evil.
He's the worst.
Dennis is an absolute sociopath. And so this is his system for getting women. And Cody, you just watched it, so you can explain it better than you can.
So the episode starts. I'm going to give a 2-minute synopsis. The episode starts with Dennis saying, "Mac, you have to listen to this. This woman is so in love with me." And then he plays a voicemail and he's like, "Dennis, you asshole. You're such a terrible person. I hate you. I know that you are like basically a sociopath and I never want to see you again." And then Mac and Dennis look at each other and they're like, "Oh God, she's really in love with you." And Dee is like, "What? No, she's not." And Dennis is like, "Okay, I need to explain what's going on here." So he says, this is my system for getting women to fall in love with me. And basically he manipulates them and makes them depend on him and then leaves them forever. And the idea behind leaving them forever is at any point he can call them up, and because they're so clinging and because he's fostered such a dependent relationship, they will come running at the sound of his voice. So we should be able to read these, because I thought it was interesting as we were talking about the way that Mormonism leaves a vacuum in your life. That's exactly what Dennis is trying to do. He's trying to leave a vacuum in a Dennis-shaped hole, if you will, in these women's lives.
Oh, no.
And so, that he would like to then fill. And so, so number one, I mean, should we just read these? And if it applies to Mormonism, say how we think it applies. And if it doesn't, just...
Yeah.
Okay. So number one is demonstrate value. So, I mean, this one is obvious, right? Eternal life. You get to live with your family. You'll be happy. I mean, what other ones can you guys think of?
I'm curious how Dennis demonstrates that. I'm guessing it's in bed.
No. So the example he gives is he's trying to bang a pharmacist. And so he shows up to the pharmacist with a prescription for his sick grandmother, because he wants to show this pharmacist that he is a good grandson and a caring person. So that's how he demonstrates value.
I think Mormonism, it's the community of people that are there and they got your back.
Yeah, it demonstrates its own value like that by explaining to you that it's the only, because as a missionary, that's one of the first things you ask people is, do you know that you can be together with your family forever?
What?
Exactly.
And it's funny because like a lot of people are just like, well, yeah, I believe in God. Why wouldn't I be able to be with my family forever? But anyway, it thinks that that's a very unique pitch.
Yeah. So then you engage physically. So in Dennis's case, this means you sleep with the woman, which is the whole goal of the system, by the way.
So how does Mormonism sleep with you?
That's what we need to know.
It sleeps with your heart. I don't know.
Like, I mean, feeling the spirit, is that how they like, like how you go to church and you get these good feelings when you hear people like, yeah, you hear people like hearing, bearing their testimony and you're like, wow, like they overcame all these trials. And I feel the Holy Ghost telling me this is a good thing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So after that, Dennis moves to nurture dependence. So in the show, what he does is he will call these women from phone numbers they won't recognize and pretend like he's a crazy neighbor who's going to come hurt them. Because then,
oh my gosh!
Because then,
yeah, Dennis is evil.
Dennis is evil. Remember that? So he will do this, and then he will show up to their apartment to protect them from the thing that he created. So I actually think that maybe you could call this like, because everybody believes they're going to be with their family after they die, right? But Mormons manufacture the scarcity of being with your family after you die. They tell you, well, you actually have to follow these rules. Otherwise, you won't be with your family. So they kind of nurture dependence in that way. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, for sure. And also with Satan, like
they nurture dependence in about a million.
There's a lot
ways.
of ways.
That's what I was explaining. Is that they are a crutch.
Yeah.
For your entire identity.
Like, yeah, let me tell you about Satan and how he is getting to you and how you got to do these things to stop him getting from you. And by the way, I'm here to save you from this guy who's getting you. It's like,
totally.
Or
there's that old. Sorry, go ahead.
It's just the last thing I was gonna say about that is there's this invisible poison that you don't see that you're eating, and I have the invisible antidote.
Yeah. It's that Brad Wilcox talk from years ago that's like the ultimate atonement or the something atonement where it's like his grace is sufficient. Maybe it's called that. But basically the point of the talk is you don't just need Jesus's grace to get from the 10% that you couldn't do. You actually need his grace to do the 90% that you could do and then the 10% on top of it. So like you rely so much on the saving power of the atonement that like you can do literally nothing on your own. You need us for everything.
You are hopeless. Yeah.
Yeah. You want to be forgiven? Talk to your bishop. You want to be saved? Take the sacrament. Show up to church on Sunday. Like there is nothing about exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I think nurture dependence is pretty.
Oh, that one's
pretty
the best
apparent. Yeah, and that's also the funniest part of the episode. So then neglect emotionally is when he stops answering. He continues to do the phone calls from the crazy neighbor, but he stops showing up and he just disappears. And then, and so I guess you could say the way that Mormonism does this, I know that like this isn't a very obvious one, and I don't think that the Mormon Church does it a lot, but they definitely do emphasize the growth of new members over the growth of older members. And so if you've been in the church or if you're like a 2-year convert, this is what I saw in Peru a lot. If you're a convert that's like started to attend, then they will forget about you to worry about the newer people. And so it's not that you get totally forgotten about, but they're no longer love bombing you, or they're no longer like making you feel like, oh my God, you're part of a great group.
Well, and I think one maybe like other aspect that you could kind of relate to it would be like they get you hooked on like these things that they have to offer, right? Like going to church and reading your scriptures and all that. And you get like really attached to doing those things and needing to do those things. And they tell you that when you don't do those things, you're going to feel bad. And so then when you don't do those things, you do feel bad. And then you feel like you need to go back. Anyway, that it maybe it's a little more obscure, but
yeah. And yeah, so the last two inspire hope, which is the example in the show is Dennis shows up after an absence, right? Because he was just neglecting this person emotionally. He shows up after an absence and like from the window says, I've been really distant because I've been afraid to tell you how I feel because I'm afraid of my emotions. And then he sleeps with her one more time. And then she thinks that now she's got him and now like this is going to be a happily ever after thing, and then he disappears forever. That's where separate entirely comes from. So like inspire hope would probably be like general conference or like moments that are like meant to like really inspire you and give you a spiritual high and then send you on your way is the way that I would think about it. I don't think that the Mormon church separates entirely, but they aren't motivated to. There's no reason for them to separate entirely, so they just want to inspire hope perpetually, in my opinion.
Yeah, they want to keep you on that track of going. That's so
one
funny.
of my favorite parts of that whole episode is that like Dennis goes through all this, and essentially what he's doing is he's trying to do this so that he gets sex without a relationship. But like if you look at all the shit that he has to go through, like that's way more work than marriage. So like, if he just got married, he would have less difficult time and he would have sex more.
It's true. And I guess in the context that we're talking about this, like the way that the Mormon church will leave a hole in your life that will then be filled by other ideologies, in that same way, Mac and Frank are ready. As soon as the Dennis system is complete, Mac has a system called move in after completion, the Mac system. And then Frank goes in for thirds. So it's like, you see how susceptible we are as soon as we fall for some sort of a structure. As soon as that structure leaves, we want to fill that hole as quickly as we can. And the episode does a great job of just explaining, like if you imagine Dennis is a religion and then Mac is politics and then Frank is like, I don't know what Frank would be, but like you imagine that it goes in that order.
I don't know, because it's to explain to people that haven't seen the show, Mac is not much. He's not, I don't know, he's better than Dennis. He's more moral than Dennis, but kind of just because he's dumber. Like Dennis is the smartest out of them and therefore the most evil because he's the most capable. And Frank is he's Danny DeVito and he's disgusting and he'll just take whatever. So it's kind of funny that they're the ones that swarm in after and take just the broken people that Dennis leaves in his wake. Yeah. And like, all right, come on.
Yep. It's a great show and that's a good episode.
It is a good episode.
Well, this has been a fun time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a long time. That went by really quickly.
It's not very long if you've ever done a live with Jonathan Streeter or Chris Hanna, but it was definitely long.
I've never done a live with either of them. I don't know if my bladder would make it.
I leave a few times to.
Oh my gosh! I never knew that.
You have like a bag in your sock.
Oh my god!
Jonathan's good about it because he'll be like, okay, potty break. He's very organized.
Greg. I know Jonathan's the best.
Man. Oh, y'all ain't right. Said thanks for keeping me company while I'm doing my mean well laundry. Y'all ain't right. Yeah. You should email me. I loved your comments tonight. Yeah. What's my email? Morgan Marie Vlog. Okay. Okay, this was super fun. Y'all should check out Ubermormon. He's got a channel that's called Ubermormon, and it's below.
Yeah.
And he posted a really funny video the other day about the statistics. With the meme, the stonks.
Yeah, the stonks meme, the Mormon church versus global population, and then it's the guy saying really not stonks.
yes, that was hilarious. That made me laugh. You can, so check out Ubermormon over there. Jared's got some stuff he's been doing with some other people that's also linked below. Anyway, this was super fun chat. Thank you for all of you guys who were commenting. Y'all ain't right, and Ray, and all y'all other awesome people. And I'm trying to do these lives every Tuesday that I can. So come hang out with us again.
Hell yeah.
And we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.